This is what bad ideas look like. Hey everyone, welcome back to Playing Quietly. My name is Ryan, and today I'm bringing you another build guide. Today we are going to be talking about the build that I like to call Firestarter. This is going to be a build that revolves around fire and burning damage, as well as mod generation with a healthy amount of armor stacking for survivability. So let's take a look at what we are dealing with today. Very similar to my previous build, we're going to be running Medic in the main slot for the Regenerator, and in our second slot we are going to be running Archon for the mod damage boosts. As far as armor goes, we're going to be going with the Crown of the Red Prince. For one, it looks cool, and two, it's going to give us some extra fire resist. For the rest of the armor, we're going to be going with Leto Mark II, which is going to bring us to a weight of 75, when we couple that with our traits that we're going to take a look at in a minute. For the Relic Heart, I like to go with the Crystal Heart for the survivability. It's going to give us that 50% damage reduction. And in the Relic Fragment slots, we're going to be going with Mythic Elemental Damage, Mythic Mod Damage, and Mythic Range Crit Chance. The weapons aren't going to matter so much as long as they have two open slots. In our long gun, I like to run Hotshot. This is going to imbue our ammo with fire, and it's also going to put burning on the enemies. I also like to go with Twisting Wounds for the Mutator. The melee isn't going to matter as much. I like to go with Smolder just because it matches the theme of the build. And in the handgun, I like to run the Tech 22, and we are going to go with Firestorm and Harmonizer. Let's take a look at the jewelry in our next slot. When we're doing bosses, we're going to run the Talisman of the Sun. This is going to increase our fire damage by a nice 20% and our burning damage by a whopping 50%. We're going to run the Alumni Ring. This is going to increase all elemental damage by 10%. The Singed Ring, which will increase all damage done to burning enemies by 10%. The Shard Banded Ring, which is going to increase mod damage by 12%. And the ring that's going to tie it all together and make the build work is the Stone of Malevolence. Elemental damage is going to generate 15% additional mod power. Now, when we are out in the world killing regular enemies, you guys know me, we're going to go with the Toxic Release Valve. This is just going to give us an easy AoE. It's going to stun the enemies around us, and it actually does quite a bit of damage with this build as well. So again, for trash, Toxic Release Valve, bosses, I like to go with the Talisman of the Sun. Traits are largely left up to you. Of course, we're going to get Flashcaster and Triage by our traits, or by our archetypes. I like to go with Fortify for armor effectiveness, and Strongback. I go 7 points so that we can get to the 75 weight given the armor that we're wearing. Then I like to put 10 points into Swiftness, 10 into Vigor, 10 into Spirit, 10 into Barkskin, and 10 into Siphoner. Now, again, these are kind of left up to you. The build is not going to necessarily be affected in terms of its damage output and what it does via the traits. So, you can play around with it and do with it what you will. Now let's talk about how the build is actually going to work. Because we're stacking the amount of mod power and mod regeneration that we are, given if we have enough enemies on screen, and even for bosses, we're actually going to be able to spam Firestorm really as much as we want. It's going to have enough to recharge itself, essentially, especially on boss fights. For regular enemies, we are going to be using Hotshot. Hotshot is also basically going to replenish itself for the most part. If you do find yourself in a situation where you feel you're not generating enough mod power and survivability isn't an issue for you, you can also swap Archon and Medic. I just like to play it this way to play it a little bit safe. Some things to note about the build. Firestorm will definitely kill you if you're not careful with it. If you put it on an enemy that charges you, it will spread to you. It is quite easy to get killed by it. I mean, look how much, even with the amount of fire resist we have, it kills us basically right off the bat. Another thing we should note about Firestorm is it does have a tendency to bounce off things. So, yeah, if we fire it like that, depending on what we actually hit with it, it can bounce. For most enemies, it will stick to it, which is why I say, I mean, don't fire it on anything that's actually going to be charging you. I actually think the best use of Firestorm, if you're going to be using it against regular enemies, is to use it in a situation where you can cause a choke point. So basically enemies are going to filter in and they're going to run right through that fire cloud and it's going to kill them 99% of the time. It might actually, even for larger enemies, it might block them from using pathways. So that's how I'd recommend using it against regular enemies. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for today's build. Again, this is just kind of another quirky elemental damage build. I know it's definitely not the highest DPS build out there, but it is definitely very fun to use, and I recommend giving it a try. It does melt bosses pretty well, pun intended. But that's going to do it for today. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If you found this video helpful or entertaining, hopefully I have earned your subscription. But until then, we will see you guys next time. Have yourselves a good one.
How's that, huh? You ain't so tough? Yeah, you ain't so bad.